Let me be the voice of reason. What's up, YouTube? So I get a lot of questions on how to get started with a collection, with a breeding program, and really the answer to that question isn't as simple as it may seem. My first question is always going to be, what funds do you have to start working on your program, your collection, whatever it is that you want to do? Some people want to collect before they start breeding. That's fine too. So really the question is, what are your funds looking like? And I ask this question because there's a lot of people out there that want to get straight into making money off breeding bearded dragons or breeding ball pythons or breeding dogs or whatever they're breeding. And while that may seem like a great idea, it also has to go with the funds that you have available, because as you all probably know by now, if you are trying to buy an animal, a baby young animal or whatever, so a baby snake or a baby bearded dragon or a puppy or whatever, kitten, whatever you're getting into, is going to cost much less than if you were to get the adult version of that same animal. So if I'm looking at a clown ball python, a baby's going to cost me way less than an adult clown ball python. Obviously, gender plays a role in this as well. So if you have a male, it's probably going to be cheaper than a female. And then obviously, depending on the genetics and stuff like that, that also plays a part into it. So when I ask the question, what are your funds looking like? I usually get the people that are, oh, I'm putting it on a credit card, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. And while that may be your best option for getting into breeding ball pythons or getting into breeding bearded dragons, I personally think that there's a better way of going around and getting the animals that you want without having to go into debt for it. Now, for myself, I've been doing this for quite a bit amount of time. I'm not gonna, I've said this in every video, I feel like, how long I've been doing it, but I've been doing it quite a long time. And when I first started this, I used cash. I didn't use any debt whatsoever because I was young. I couldn't even get a credit card at the time. So 16, 17, couldn't get a credit card. So I bought everything cash. Now, after the years went by, I started seeing things that were higher end and better and all that. And at that point, I started using PayPal credit, which is like pay every month or something like that, or 6 months, same as cash or something like that. And that worked at the time because I was at the point where I needed to build credit and I needed to do all that. So I was just trying to find different avenues, and that obviously worked because I could buy a bearded dragon with that money and get something that I wanted without having to have the cash for it at the time. Now, since then, my views on credit has completely changed. So I don't use credit anymore, and I only use the funds that are available to me. So I save up for everything that I want. So if I buy something that's $1,000, I have been saving up for months trying to get that $1,000, and then I bought the animal that I was looking for. So obviously that doesn't work out for everybody, because sometimes you want an animal that you see right then and there, and you don't think there's going to be another option later on, and you're like, I need it right now, and you go ahead and swipe that card, and that isn't the best thing in my opinion. Let me give you a reason why that's not the best thing. Obviously, everybody knows about interest, so I'm not going to go into detail too much, but let's say you spent $5,000 on a collection. So you bought 20 animals for $5,000. They're all breeder animals. They're all ready to breed. All you need is housing. So now to house them, you're also spending another $2,000. You spent $7,000 on a collection and housing and everything like that. But that $5,000, let's say the $2,000 you paid cash, no big deal. So the $5,000 that you did not pay in cash, depending on your credit, depending on your situation, depending on the car you're using or whatever you're using, depending on that, you're going to either be paying a lot in interest, or you're going to be paying it off that same month. So if you already had $5,000 to pay it off that same month, then you should have just waited just a little bit longer until you got paid or whatever, and then you should have just bought it cash. Because now if you don't have that cash and you're paying it monthly basis, and let's say you're paying a little bit over minimum, that $5,000 is going to take you so many years to pay off. Let's say the minimum is, I don't know, $100 and you're paying $150. You also got to think about all the interest charges and everything that come in there, which could be another $150 depending on your credit. And depending on the APR and everything like that you got when you filled out the application. So with that said, that $5,000, if it takes you, let's say, 3 years to pay off that card, which it can be 3 years, it can be 2 years, it could be a year. I don't know what your situation is like, but however long, that's $50 to $150 that you're taking every month to pay on that interest alone, that APR. So depending on the card too, there's monthly APR, there's annual APR, so it really just depends, but that's just how that goes. So with that said, you may have spent $5,000, but you end up paying $8,000 on that collection because you paid it on credit. So while that may seem like the best thing for you to do at that moment, and you're like, oh well, if I pay $5,000 now and I get everything breeding, then I can make that $5,000 back in a year. It's not that simple, because you're also having to figure out feeding costs for the animals. You also have to make sure you sell everything, because sometimes it's not as easy to sell everything that you may think, especially if you're not producing anything that's worth selling. So those are all things you need to think about. The problem with people getting into this and saying, I'm going to swipe that card and I'll put everything on credit, is the fact that now you are in debt to your animals. Not only are you in debt to your animals via time and resources, but now you're in debt via finances. It's a lot. It's going to be a lot. Not only do you already have the animals, you're going to have to pay for them to eat, you're going to have to pay for them to live, and now you're going to have to pay for them to have them. So it's going to get a lot more expensive than if you were just to initially buy it cash. Now I know most people are like, oh well, I have good credit or whatever. That's fine. Do you? I'm just giving you my opinion, my advice, and because this is something that doesn't make you money right away, you shouldn't actually put it on credit. And the reason I say this is because, like I've already mentioned, it's going to take you time to pay that off. If it takes you 2 years to pay that off, and let's say you are breeding as soon as you get the animals, and then you get 2 seasons in on breeding those animals, and those 2 seasons made you, let's say, $20,000, and you're like, yeah, I could have paid off that $5,000, but I just reinvested. That's a lot of things that people do, is they just keep reinvesting, and then they forget that they have a looming debt of $5,000 and just paying the minimum on. Because it's easier to reinvest and grow your collection with cash. And that's where people get caught. It's like the first initial investment was credit, and then after that, every single investment after that is cash, and then the cash isn't going towards the debt, and then they get trapped in that loop, that cycle of, well, now if I put everything back into the debt, then I'll still need that money to reinvest, so then you just swipe the card again, and then you're back into that loop. Now, I know I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a accountant, I'm not a financial guru or nothing like that. I'm just speaking from experience, because in the past I have bought dubia roaches on credit, I have bought bearded dragons on credit, and while it seemed like the best thing for me to do at the moment, so in 2018 or a little bit before, maybe 2017, I sold all my animals. I had nothing left, and the thing is, all the animals that I sold in 2017, if I had bought any of them on credit, I definitely did not get what I paid for it. Because even though it may have, let's say, doubled in price, if I was paying interest on that and it took me forever to pay that interest off, then I would have already been paid that double on interest. So it didn't make me any money. And I know that sucks to say that, oh, these are animals, they're trying to make me money. But if you're in this for a business, you don't want to be in debt to the business. That's not the way to go about it. That's not the way to start up anything. Now, if you, after you've started up and you are consistently making money, if you are the type of person that wants to have that credit card just for monthly expenses and then you pay it off every month, that's you. You do what you want. But in my experience, the one time you don't pay that off that month, the next month you're getting that interest charge, and then you just pay double for something that you could have just bought cash. So that's just my opinion. Again, I'm not a financial guru. I'm not giving financial advice or anything like that. Just speaking from experience. So, back to that example of the $5,000 collection. 2 years ago, you made $20,000. So, if you're thinking into consideration of assets and debts and all that stuff, you technically, let's say, after everything, you profited like $12,000. But now you also have to pay the debt back. Now you are at $7,000. So, yes, you spent $5,000. Yes, you got your $5,000 back, but that's not taking into consideration the interest, because the interest could have been $2,000. It took you 2 years to pay it off. The interest could have been quite a bit. Now, obviously, like I said, it really depends. So it could have been less than that, but let's say it was $2,000. Now you're left with $5,000 out of that whole 2 years of breeding, when you could have just tried buying lower end animals, or maybe less animals, cash. So let's go back and give you a different example. Instead of that $5,000 collection, you buy 5 animals for $1,000 because you have $1,000 cash. And to house those animals, it only costs $500. So remember, initially you spent $2,000 on the housing because you had $2,000 in cash, and you also spent $5,000 in credit for the animals. So now you only spend $1,500. So you actually have $500 left over that you can use for a year of feeding or 2 years of feeding, however long you need. But that $500 is going to hold you over before you start making any money back from those animals. Now, obviously, it's only 5 animals, so instead of $20,000, you only made $5,000. But guess what? You don't have to pay anybody back because you have already used the $500 for feeding costs and everything like that. You've already used $1,500 for purchasing, so that $5,000 is clean. You're not in debt to anybody. So this way you make $5,000 clean. The other way you make $5,000 after paying everybody back and all that. So I think this way is actually easier because you're doing less. You're putting less stress on you and all of that. And then all that money you can just reinvest. So now that $5,000 that you made, let's say you want to reinvest $3,500. Well, guess what? Now you're up to that 20 animal mark that you wanted to be in. And instead of spending $5,000 initially, you're spending $5,000 over the course of time. And eventually you're getting up to that collection that you want to have. And then all of the money that you're making is not going to be in debt to anybody else. So you don't have to pay anyone back, the credit card company, the bank. You don't have to pay nobody back. You're just banking that money. You're putting it in your pocket, minus obviously like taxes and stuff like that, because you do have to pay taxes. Can't get away from that. But yeah, you will have to pay taxes. You will have to do all that. So in my opinion, out of the 2 examples that I gave you, option 1 and spending that $5,000 on credit isn't going to work out, as well as option 2, where you're just buying everything cash and you're not having to pay anybody back. So both of those options will make you $5,000 after 2 years. But guess what? One option is a lot of work. You're always going to be wondering about that looming debt over your head. That weight's always going to be on your shoulders. The second option, it's only 5 animals that you got to deal with versus 20. That's even less time that you have to spend actually doing the thing that's going to make you $5,000. So in my opinion, option 2 sounds like the better deal, and you can reinvest without having to worry about paying anybody back, without having to worry about the stress of paying anybody back. Option 2 also has no monthly payments towards interest. So option 2 is even more beneficial because you're not actually having to pay somebody back every month until you are done paying it. So if you're not making any money, option 1 would be you're paying from your income versus paying from your business income. Option 2, you're not paying anybody and all the income is business income and your income. No money's going out towards a bank, towards a credit card company. It's all staying here with you, and that's it. So in my opinion, like I said, option 2 is the better option. So hopefully you like this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything that I put out in the future. And hopefully you don't make any bad choices as far as buying things on credit, because while it may seem like the best option at the moment, if you consider all of the costs and everything that you have to go through just to pay that off and how long it's going to take you, it's not going to be the best option. So with that said, peace.